Chapter 251. 3. Why kill me? Qing Luo Yan's face finally began to become tainted with a sliver of panic. No, she must have fallen into an illusion. She clearly remembers that she had been resting in her room. Moreover, she clearly remembers that night has just fallen not long ago. So how can dawn be breaking so soon? Luo Yan, your heart is really just too venomous. Why would you treat me like this? The sorrowful mourning voice of the woman dragged Qing Luo Yan away from her own thoughts. Qing Luo Yan turned her eyes to look and saw that it was her eldest sister, the gentlest and kindest woman among the 11 sisters, known to be the most tender-hearted and virtuous. She had a man she likes back then, and was about to be wed, her tummy carrying their 3-month-old child. But on the night of her wedding, the child died inside her tummy, and overcome with grief by the death of her child, she was found dead in her bridal chamber. The child had died from Qing Luo Yan's cultivation of the forbidden arts. The child's life essence completely sucked out from its body. Although she had not done that intentionally, she could not be absolved of all blame from the deaths of the mother and child. Eldest sis, I'm sorry. I do not want your apology. I want you to give me back my child. Do you know? He had yet to even gaze upon this world before he was killed. You were going to be his aunt. How could you possibly bear to doing something too insidious to him? The gentle countenance was tinged with a slight craziness, as she suddenly rushed forward to clutch at her throat, the force of her grip causing Qing Luo Yan to be unable to breathe. She was no longer able to differentiate whether this was an illusion or reality, as the feeling that she was going to die was just too real. It must be said that among all the sisters who died because of her, the only one she felt she let down was only this woman before her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That was because the woman had really been too nice to her, the eldest sister caring for her almost like a mother. The eldest sister had cared for all the younger siblings better than their father, but she had been the first one to lose her life. The karma from cultivating the forbidden arts would strike the people closest to the person practicing it, and the person Qing Luo Yan was closest to was her eldest sister. When it happened, it was already too late. Her eldest sister laid in a pool of her own blood, her body already cold. Her face was twisted up in horror and agony, her eyes wide open, like she had died with aggrievement in her heart. But upon further inspection, it was discovered that the baby's death had affected the mother too greatly. They were not able to uncover anything else other than that, and there was nothing they could do but to put an end to the matter. Coming to face the very person who caused her to be wrecked with endless guilt, Qing Luo Yan was unable to put up the slightest resistance, allowing the woman to maniacally throttle her neck. Her eyes closed in resignation as she felt the air in her chest growing less and less. Through great effort, she managed to utter weakly, I'm sore. Sorry. Chapter 251. For why kill me? Just as she was feeling like she was completely out of air and was going to die, the grip around her neck loosened, and air returned back into her chest anew. The next second, her tightly shut eyes slowly opened. She was lying within her own sleeping chambers, her back soaked in cold sweat. Within the spacious palatial chambers, a lone candle threw its flickering light over the place, and nothing looked out of place. But Qing Luo Yan knew what she had just experienced. She raised a hand to touch her neck, and could still feel a slight painful soreness. Had it been a dream, or did it really happen? Qing Luo Yan slowly sat up from her bed, and went slowly one step at a time before the window she had opened right when it had all begun. Her outstretched hand paused for a moment, before she slowly pulled it open. Rain was still falling, the sky still pitch dark. Nothing had changed. Has she really been dreaming? Qing Luo Yan blew out a breath to compose herself, and was just about to shut the window when she suddenly caught sight of something out of the corner of her eyes, and she shrank back in fear. Everything looked blurry and hazy under the wet night sky, but when that bolt of lightning had struck over the horizon just now, it had lit the place up outside for an instant. She had seen a red piece of cloth, hanging from a sharp branch of a tree. On the other side, Qing Yu had just returned to her room. She took off the other layer of clothes she wore on the outside, and with a snap of her fingers, she summoned up a flame to incinerate the clothes, obliterating all evidence. An imperceptible smile curved up the ends of her lips, her phoenix-light eyes bright with a strange glint. She just could not help but find it funny thinking about how frightened Qing Luoyan had looked earlier. It was said that as long as one did not do anything wrong, one need not be afraid of knocks on their door at night. Seeing that look on her face just now, she must have committed quite a good amount of misdeeds. She was still engrossed in her thoughts when she felt pressure tightening around her waist, and a wide chest plastered itself against her back. The man's long and powerful arm embraced her tightly, as he said in a low, amused voice, "What are you scheming in your head that is making you smile so craftily, HM?" Qing Yu was unable to do anything else but to stick her elbow into the man plastered against her back. "Let go. My clothes are all wet." Lu Junyao wrapped his large hand over the young lady's icy cold hand and said, "It's all right. My body is warm, and I can help warm you right up." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It looked like he was not going to release her. Qing Yu could not help but roll her eyes helplessly. She had originally intended to go take a bath, and now that this fellow is here, she would naturally not be able to even mention that, or he would surely be capable of insisting on something like bathing together. As that thought ran through her mind, Qing Yu gathered up her spirit energy to evaporate the rain from her body, drying herself out. "How's things? What did you do tonight?" Lu Junyao held her as he sat down on a chair, and opened his mouth to ask. Hearing those words, Qing Yu curved up the corners of her lips, her face brightening up in glee. "I played a good trick on that woman." Chapter 252. 1. Unable to escape bathing together. Hearing that, Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow as he looked at her in surprise. "What did you do?" From what he knew, Qing Luoyan was a careful woman with a suspicious nature, wary of everything that happens around her, who did not fully trust even the people who had served her for many years, not to mention coming to believe in Qing Yu, whom she had already been suspicious of. "I added a little something to the incense she likes to burn every day, and crafted an illusory scene that would make her thoughts run wild," Qing Yu said with a wink, the expression on her face looking very sly. "Incense? That's right. Throughout the few days that I've been here, I noticed that although Qing Luoyan possessed high and profound cultivation, she has an ailment that has troubled her for very long. She suffers from severe insomnia, and needs to rely on burning incense that is mixed with drugs to help her to sleep." Qing Yu went on to explain. Lu Junyao burst out laughing when he heard that. Having done so many evil and shameless deeds, it would be strange if she does not have insomnia. Qing Yu nodded, indicating agreement to his words. "Looks like what you told me before is true." She saw two people in her dream. One was the elder sister she felt most guilty and remorseful towards, and the other person was my mother. And she seems to be rather sensitive to the color red, because that is my mother's favorite color. That is correct. And Aunt Lon has been in existence she has always been jealous of. Lu Junyao nodded and replied. Qing Yu curved up her lips, and a strange glint flashed in her eyes. She will not let the matter rest like this. She will definitely investigate further. Song Jian had been involved in this matter, and if Song Jian is not able to give her a reasonable explanation, she will start to become suspicious of Song Jian. When they start to drift apart, then it will be time for me to make my entrance. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You are seeking to get rid of Song Jian, who is the most loyal to her? But Song Jian had even gone on to betray the godly lord for her back then. I fear that it will not be easy to drive a wedge between them. Of course you will not be able to incite distrust between them with just one incident. Qing Yu raised her hand up to rub at her chin and started to say slowly. Song Jian's greatest virtue is that he is able to predict the future by studying the stars, possessing an ability that most others do not have, and his premonitive powers are greater than anyone else in the divine temple. It is said that people who cultivate the study of priesthood are born with another heavenly eye, but it is invisible to other people. But if Song Jian comes to lose that eye, will Qing Luoyan still have any need for him? Qing Yu said with a sinisterly chilling smile. Lu Junyao's gaze could not help but turn deep. When this little one here wants to be ruthless, not many are able to match up to her. A priest without the heavenly eye was as good as a cripple, as they were blessed with extraordinary powers through their sight. If their heavenly eye were to suffer damage, their normal eyes would be damaged as well, to become a blind and useless person. Chapter 252. 2. Unable to escape bathing together, Lu Junyao was not worried that the young lady would be disadvantaged in this place, as her mind was really just too clever, and she had quite a number of hidden trump cards on her as well. Maybe except for Qing Luoyan herself, probably no one in this place would be able to do anything to her. Besides, before Qing Luoyan was able to determine her identity, Qing Luoyan would not do anything to her too carelessly. Just as they were talking to each other, Qing Yu suddenly felt a tingle in her nose, and then let out a great big sneeze. Her body shivered a couple of times, and she felt a little cold. Lu Junyao's eyes darkened as he came to discover that though her clothes were dry, her head of long black hair was still dripping wet, with beads of water falling off from the end. Although the season had turned into the beginning of spring, it was still a little chilly at night. Lu Junyao looked at her rubbing her nose innocently, and he could not help but stare a little perplexedly at her, before he grabbed at her arm and pulled her to walk off into a particular direction. Qing Yu was initially a little confused, but when they reached the place after a short while, she was a little stunned by what she saw. Right before her was a wide and expansive hot spring pool with steam rising in lazy swirls above the water's surface. This is a naturally formed hot spring, and its water holds robust spirit energy. Go in and have a soak to drive out the chill. Lu Junyao was already pulling her forward as he spoke. By the time Qing Yu was able to react, she quickly shook her head and said, No need, no need. I am not cold anymore. Your body is still so cold to the touch, and you're telling me you're not feeling cold. Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow to look at her. I told you before that you are born with a chilly body constitution? Then this will be the perfect opportunity for you to see if the waters can nurse your body back to health. Upon saying that, Lu Junyao was not going to listen to any more of her excuses, and he stretched his long arm out to push Qing Yu right into the hot spring. Hey you! Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu was caught off guard, and almost swallowed a few mouthfuls of water. The expression on her face was initially a little flustered till she discovered that the water was not that deep, and her feet could touch the bottom, the water only reaching just below her neck. She could not help but feel a mild anger rise up as she glared angrily at the man. I said I don't want to soak. Why did you push me? Lu Junyao stood above by the water, and looked down appreciatively at the angry-looking young lady. He then said in an amused voice, Since you do not know how to care for your body, then I have to take care of it for you. After all, you belong to me now, and I have to be responsible with my things. Who did you say belongs to you? Qing Yu snorted derisively, feeling a little awkward as she turned her head away, like she did not even want to look at the man. Oh, you're denying it now? Hearing that, an obvious change came over the expression on the man's face. His voice was sinister as he then opened his mouth to say, Looks like I need to do something to refresh your memory a little more. Chapter 252. 3. Unable to escape bathing together the moment his voice fell, Qing Yu subconsciously sensed danger, and she turned herself around thinking to run away. But the man was just too fast. Hearing a great splash of water, Qing Yu suddenly found herself caught in an embrace in the next second, being held tightly pressed against a hot and burning chest. A devilishly mirthful voice sounded above her head. Where do you think you're running off to? Qing Yu did not dare move, her arms wrapped around herself as she said in a weak voice, I wasn't running away. Good. Lu Junyao said as he squeezed the soft figure in his arm more tightly. Let's recall what was just said a moment ago. You said that you are not mine. From inside out, not even a single strand of hair belongs to me? Qing Yu could not help but roll her eyes when she heard that, and she muttered under her breath. Strands of hair fall off all the time. So how could I possibly watch to make sure my hair doesn't fall? What was that? Nothing. You cannot blame her for being meek, as they were in a highly remote and secluded spot, without a single sign of anyone nearby. A man and a woman alone in a place like this and scantily clad while locked in an intimate embrace. It was a really dangerous situation. She had quickly dried her wet clothes out with spirit power, because she did not want this fella to use that as an excuse to ask her to take a bath. But now, she had unintentionally sneezed, and she was immediately brought here to take a couple bath. Didn't you want me to soak in the water to purge the chill out from my body? Why have you jumped in yourself as well? Qingyu squirmed as she protested, as the man's body felt just too hot, which made her feel a little uncomfortable. Inside the hot spring, and holding the young lady whose clothes were soaked through, when the young lady squirmed, Lu Junyao felt a fire rise within his body, and he had nowhere to vent it out. Having no other choice but to endure it, he squeezed the young lady's hand, and his voice sounded a little hoarse as he said, I was quite in the rain earlier as well, and I might have caught a cold as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU to the man who had never once caught a cold for the past 200 over years. If he were to really catch a chill with this little one here, he thought that it might be something rather interesting to see. Then release me and go over to the other end. How am I going to get a good soak with you holding me like this? Qingyu asked as she bit her lips slightly, her hand reaching around to pull off the man's large hand around her waist. No can do. I do not know what kind of unknown dangers could be lurking in the water, and if I am too far away from you, I will not be able to protect you in the first instance something happens. Lu Junyao bluffed confidently, his eyes not even blinking. Not to mention that there wasn't any kind of danger in the hot spring, but with his skills and incredible speed, he didn't sound all that convincing. How could Qingyu not know that he was spouting absolute nonsense? She clicked her tongue and retorted, I am capable of protecting myself if I happen to encounter any danger. Don't think that I am really that weak and defenseless. Chapter 252. 4. Unable to escape bathing together. Upon saying that, she summoned up spirit powers into her hand and blasted Lu Junyao's hand off her, seeking to make her way over to the other side of the hot spring pool. The pool was enormous, a good 10 meters wide. Seeing that the young lady was going slowly further and further away from him, Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed, and the corners of his lips then curved up. A devilishly mesmerizing expression then came onto his handsome countenance, as he began to say in a soft voice, Little fox, have you ever seen anyone soak in a hot spring with their clothes on? Qingyu was startled, and still had not yet completely deciphered the deep meaning behind his words, when she suddenly found her shoulder becoming exposed in the very next second. Her thoroughly soaked clothes had actually disintegrated into countless tiny pieces, floating over the water's surface like tiny flower petals. Her back facing him, that fair jade smooth skin, and that exquisitely beautiful back immediately became revealed, half of it submerged in the water, the other clearly exposed half stoking up the fire in Lu Junyao's already fiery eyes. Qingyu's eyes flared wide with surprise in that instant, never imagining that this fellow would ever be so despicable, to employ the use of his spirit powers to destroy her clothes in order to take advantage of her. Lu Junyao, can you be any more shameless? To think that he is even the overlord of the dark lands, being blessed with such a highly level of cultivation, is to merely let him tear a woman's clothes into shreds? That is just too despicable to even speak of. She clasped her arms protectively over her chest, turning sideways to throw a scathing glare out of the corners of her eyes at him. You mustn't get angry. One would naturally not wear clothes while soaking themselves in a hot spring, or they wouldn't be able to get much of an effect. If you feel that you've been disadvantaged, I can jolly well let you look at me in return. Lu Junyao's tone of voice was highly earnest and sincere, and he then went on to pull at his clothes before his chest, to reveal a large part of his strong and powerful chest with its well-defined muscles. What was strange to see was that the man's skin was exceptionally fair, but did not look feminine in the slightest. Instead, it made him look even more enticing, the strong hard muscles, giving one a great sense of security just by looking at them. Qingyu merely glanced at them for a brief moment before she quickly turned her head away, biting her lip as she exclaimed loudly, Don't take off any further. Huh? Lu Junyao blinked his eyes. But didn't you find it unfair? So I have to show myself to you as well, isn't it? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU no need. Qingyu was feeling her body turn hot for the first time in her life. She curled up her fingers and wanted to pull out a set of clothes from her dimensional space to change into immediately, as she did not want to face him without any clothes on like this. It would be too embarrassing. But the man's body came to press right against hers in the next moment, her completely uncovered body, and his hand was starting to become unruly under the water's surface. "You, be good. I just want a hug." Although that's what he said through his mouth, his long slender fingers were slowly moving from her waist and drifting upwards. Chapter 253. 1. Gentle, tender, and heartwarming. Lu Junyao was extremely blessed. Not only was he born with a countenance that made women fall head over heels with, even the skin on his hands were smooth and tender, without the slightest blemish or callus. When his fingers ran lightly over her bare skin, they elicited an electrifying and numbing feeling. Qingyu immediately felt the temperature in the body rise up further, and she felt her face burn. She bit down on her lip, and it was after she deliberated for a long while that she was able to say in a barely audible whisper, "Can you keep a further distance away from me?" Lu Junyao murmured as he lay his head lazily upon the young lady's shoulder, that gave off a mild fragrance. Although he had not taken all his clothes off earlier, they were now still in complete disarray, revealing a little bit here and barely covering in another place. An indescribably sexy sight. Qingyu could feel that he was sticking to her even more tightly, and she could not help but show an embarrassed expression on her face. "Didn't you say that you'll let me get a good hot soak myself?" "Yes, I had wanted you to soak by yourself, but you were protesting so vehemently, so I had no choice but to come down and accompany you." Lu Junyao went on to explain, but his roving hands did not stop, like they were picking on the strings of a zither, teasing tantalizingly over the young lady's back. "What are you hands doing?" Qingyu did not dare move, but tried her best to cover her own body with her two hands, asking the man through tightly clenched teeth. Never had she ever expected that after her anger-tinged words came out from her mouth, the man would actually use them to come up with such an incredibly self-justified reason for his actions. "I'm trying to see if there are any marks left from your previous injury. If I do find any, that would mean that Bai Ziyan's healing skills have deteriorated again, and I will punish him when I go back." How could this man possibly say something so utterly shameless? It was enough that he was shameless, but he was even dragging Bai Ziyan into it to carry part of the blame. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You really have to pity Bai Ziyan, that he was serving such an unconscionable master. Qingyu cursed inwardly in her heart, and then scoffed coldly to say, "You have had a good clear look already, so you can let go of me now, right?" Lu Junyao looked at the carefully wary little figure before him, and he could not help but find it amusing. "What is making you get so nervous? I will not eat you up, you know. Don't you know that a man and a woman must refrain from direct skin contact? Moreover," Qingyu hesitated for a moment, speaking up to that point, like she was finding it hard to put it into words. "You have destroyed my clothes, and your current actions really makes it very difficult for my mind to not think in that way." The smile at the corners of Lu Yunyao's mouth then deepened. He leaned in close to the young lady's ear, and with his magnetically alluring voice that carried a hint of raspiness, he said, "It's good that you possess such awareness. You must remember to keep your distance from all male creatures in future, but you can be as intimate as you want with me. After all, I am your man, your one and only man." Chapter 253. 2. Gentle, tender, and heartwarming. Qingyu became even more embarrassed after Lu Junyao's hot breath blew into her ear with his blatantly teasing words, and she frantically struggled to escape out from his arms. Seeing that, Lu Junyao gently turned the young lady's head around to face him, his deep violet eyes gazing into her slightly flustered gaze. He whispered reassuringly in a soft voice, "No need to be afraid. I will not do anything to you. It's just, whenever I see you, I just can't seem to control my body, but need to get close to you and be a little more intimate." Those words had definitely come straight out from Lu Junyao's heart. He was not a lustful person, or he wouldn't have shown absolutely no interest in the many beautiful women who offered themselves readily to him over the past 200 years. But from the very first time he saw this little one, even though she had been disguised as a boy, he had to admit that even that cross-dressed Qing Yu had stirred his heart more than any one of those women, which sometimes made him think that the problem lay not in his preferences. It was not because those women were not outstanding enough, but that they all just lacked a certain quality that could move his heart. So when he saw the lass once again back in the gathered cloud loft, his first reaction was not to become enraged, but he had felt a sense of joy. It seemed like he had this special feeling, just for this one person only, but he had not realized it before. He had always paid very close attention to her, wanting to secretly protect her. Whenever he saw any man start to get close to her, though he showed himself to be cool about it on the surface, he was always seething inside, feeling like he was going to explode, but just did not know why he was feeling so angry. He did not know that that was how one would feel being in love with someone, and he only realized it when she told him that she liked him as well. So the feeling that he had found so strange was love, and he had already loved her from such a long time ago. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu was actually quite soft-hearted. Whenever the man was being so thuggish with her, she would turn nervous and become helplessly flustered, instinctively trying to resist him. But if he really told her sincerely how he felt, about his true feelings for her in his heart, she might not be able to help herself, but come to reciprocate those feelings. Like what was happening right at this moment. The man's attractive violet eyes were gazing tenderly at her, and she looked like she had been helplessly enchanted, a hand slowly being lifted off from her body, to lightly caress the handsome and mesmerizing countenance. She then slipped her hand behind the man's neck to pull him closer, her pink lips pressing up against the man's thin lips. The young lady's unexpected actions caused Lu Junyao to be slightly stunned, his eyes turning a brilliant deep violet for an instant. He held the back of the young lady's head firmly, and then responded manically to her kiss. But he had neglected to consider the strength of his own willpower and self-control, and had neglected to consider just how great the allure of the young lady in his arms was to him. Chapter 253. 3. Gentle, tender, and heartwarming. The fiery hot kiss began from the young lady's seductive lips, before it slowly began moving down towards her soft slender neck. She had probably just awoken from being bewitched just now as the dazed expression on her face became tinged with bashful embarrassment. It was not known where the misbehaving man came to touch, which caused the young lady to let out a soft groan, and the strength suddenly went out of her legs, her body falling to submerge under the water's surface. Seeing that, Lu Junyao quickly slipped himself into the water and held the young lady tightly in an embrace. Under the crystal-clear water, everything before him was plain to see, including the bare and curvy body of the young lady. It was really impossible to hide herself no matter how much she wanted to, and Lu Junyao's eyes brightened with a glint under the shimmering water, unable to turn his eyes away. Qingyu was feeling both embarrassed and indignant, and forgetting that she was underwater at that moment, she opened her mouth to say, "You must not." Ugh. She choked on the water that rushed into her throat, and her eyebrows creased up in agony. The very next moment, something soft pressed against her lips and pried her mouth open, giving her air. The man's attractive-looking face was right in front of her, his eyes slightly narrowed. After breathing air into her mouth, he did not immediately leave, but went on to kiss her gently. It was only after a good while that he pulled her up through the water's surface. He carried the young lady in his arms out of the pool, her body wrapped in his clothes. In the same instant that they stepped out of the hot spring, the two of them who had been dripping wet turned dry and clean like before, without a single droplet of water in their hair or their bodies. Cultivated powers that had laid idle for a few hundred years were suddenly being called forth to complete one of life's simple and insignificant tasks. Qingyu's head remained buried like an ostrich within the man's embrace that whole time, not making the slightest move at all. She did not know whether it was because she had choked on water earlier and was not feeling well, or was she really just too embarrassed to show her face to him. But from the looks of things, the latter seemed much more likely. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The hot spring here was constructed back when the godly lord was still around, but it was sealed up after a series of events, so very few people knew of its existence. Hence, even after walking a long way out from there, they did not see anyone. Lu Junyao did not walk very fast, but his footsteps did not once stop. He glanced with a smile at the curled-up figure of the young lady, who had her hands clutched tightly onto his clothes, her head buried in his chest, and refusing to come out. He just could not help himself but to lower his head, to plant a kiss on the adorable little earlobe that was exposed on the outside, seeing the fingers tighten their grip on his clothes, and that fair-skinned earlobe starting to turn red. A glint deepened in Lu Junyao's eyes, and his expression turned exceptionally jovial as he said, "This is my first time discovering that you get embarrassed so easily?" The little one was always portraying such a candid and straightforward personality, and her thinking has always been a lot more mature and sensible than other women. Moreover, ever since they had made their feelings known to each other, they had shared intimate moments before, but she still gets so easily embarrassed. Chapter 253. For, gentle, tender, and heartwarming, it really made him feel so helpless but adore her at the same time. His voice had just fallen when he heard the young lady's muffled voice rise up from before his chest. If everyone gets so shameless with you each and every time, how chaotic would the world then become? Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow when he heard that. That sounded like she was still angry with him. "All right, shall I then strip off all my clothes for you to look at in return?" Lu Junyao asked probingly. Is it because he managed to see everything of hers in the water just now and she is now angry with him for that? Who wants to look at you? Qingyu exploded out in a prickly roar. Then why? Lu Junyao sighed helplessly. Sometimes he really just can't understand how a girl thinks. But what can he do? This is his own woman, so he has to indulge her somehow. Hearing the man's tone of voice that was seemingly bemoaning his innocence, Qingyu grew even more glum. She bit her lip in frustration, and then opened her mouth to say, "You are not allowed to try to seduce me in future, and you must not be so touchy-feely with your hands anymore. Such a detestable charmer. Really wonder if she owed him something. He just needs to lay out his charms a little, and she just cannot resist him. If things continue on like this, the day will come where she will be eaten up by him without her realizing a thing. That just will not do. Having been reborn into another life, all the things that she had not experienced before must all be done at least once, taken a step at a time. Although she really loved this man from the bottom of her heart, and she wasn't exactly unwilling to give herself to him, but they were now not exactly legitimately a couple yet. She had yet to find her parents, and he was already the overlord who held reign over a major power, a man of extraordinary repute. She was not going to have the whole bunch of subordinates under him gaze at her with strange looks in their eyes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You that must at least wait till she is able to stand on her own here in Cloud Heaven, to really be able to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder. It was such a tender and heartwarming moment here for these two people here, and on the other side of Cloud Heaven, the two other people who had left from the Hell King's palace, Missouri Jingyu and Qing Lanfei, had gone a far way off from both the barbarian tribe and the Hell King's palace. They had come to stop at a busy marketplace and found themselves a tea house to take a short breather. Though the two of them possessed highly attractive and outstanding looks, but as they had not appeared in the world for 100 years, no one was able to recognize them. The 5 major powers of Cloud Heaven each had their own jurisdictions under their control, and the territory they were in at that moment belonged to the most peace-loving and amiable power among the 5, the Divine Healers sect. Chapter 254. 1. Heavenly Eye destroyed the Divine Healers sect were highly reputable in Cloud Heaven, and they were the most united and close-knit might among the several powers, where it seemed they had never once had any internal uprising before. Because the Divine Healers sect had the greatest number of members, and their people possessed unsurpassing skills in healing, members of the other powers did not dare to stir up trouble in the Divine Healer sect's territories, where even people from the Hell King's palace would show them some face. That was the reason why Qing Lanfei had chosen to hide and keep a low profile in the Divine Healer sect's territories. Where do we go next? Mo Jingyu had his eyes lowered, His thin lips pressed against the edge of his teacup as he took a tiny sip. The tea was probably not to his taste, as the man's attractive face creased up slightly, and did not touch the cup of tea anymore after that. Qing Lanfei could not help but laugh at the man when she saw that. This fella has gotten too used to fine foods and cuisines, and is not used to the quality of tea served in such small tea houses. I intend to go hide away quietly at the Divine Healer's sect, and wait till the Hell King's palace is no longer paying any attention to us before we leave. Qing Lanfei replied softly. There is someone you know well in the Divine Healer's sect. Mo Jingyu asked with an eyebrow raised. The current sect leader of the Divine Healer's sect Bai Qiu was on quite friendly terms with me before in the past. I think he will be willing to extend a helping hand. Divine Healer's sect, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was prophesied that the mind-free peak would manifest soon, and although it was known that the Divine Healer's sect mainly focused only on healing and medicine, and their fighting cultivation powers was slightly generally weaker than the other major mites in Cloud Heaven, they also had no lack of highly outstanding disciples who were skilled in both healing and battle, which was naturally seen to be just as important aspect to gain entry into that divine realm of legend. Bai Zhiyan was the young lord of the Divine Healer's sect, and because he went to join the Dark Lands back then, Bai Qiu announced to the world that he had severed their father and son ties, where they would not be in contact even upon his death. He had done that in order to protect Bai Zhiyan, and also the Divine Healer's sect itself. But that was only what was made known to the world outside. Privately, Bai Zhiyan came back a good number of times. But as he was identified as a member of the Dark Lands, he would naturally not be able to go to the Mind-Free Peak as the young lord of the Divine Healer's sect. So Bai Qiu could only pin his hopes on the sect's disciples with more outstanding talents. But even if he was able to find disciples who were good enough to make their way into the Mind-Free Peak, none of them was as outstanding as Bai Zhiyan. Bai Zhiyan was after all the most gifted talent that the Divine Healer's sect had sprouted in the past 100 years, where even his father had thought highly of the boy's gift. Chapter 254. 2. Heavenly, I destroyed thinking about that. Bai Qiu could not help but raise his palm up to cover his forehead, and gave a helpless sigh. Sect leader, someone is outside seeking an audience. A white-robed disciple stood at the door to report, his hand clasped over his fist in front of his chest. Bai Qiu was startled out of his thoughts. Another one seeking treatment? You do not need to come tell me such trifling things. The group of you can just handle it as you deem fit. The Divine Healer's sect were always known to be a highly caring bunch of people, kind and charitable, never bullying the weak, so they were held in high regard in the world. Many people who contracted illnesses would often come uninvited to seek treatment here at the Divine Healer's sect. But there were a number with nefarious intentions who feigned illnesses, coming up to them seeking only to foster closer relations. Over time, Bai Qiu began to find such matters a little frustrating, and decided to not bother himself with these things, delegating them down to the sect's disciples. Hence when he heard the disciples' words now, he immediately waved his hand dismissively and indicated that he would not meet with them. The disciple hesitated for a moment, and then opened his mouth to speak again. They are not here to seek medical treatment. The woman claimed that she is an old acquaintance of the sect leader. Woman? Bai Qiu became puzzled when he heard that. He did not remember having ever made any close female friends. So why is there a woman here at their door asking to meet him out of the blue? That's right. It is a young woman. Invite them in then. Although Bai Qiu was a little puzzled, his curiosity had been piqued. He really wanted to see just what kind of an old friend she could really be. But when the slender figure came slowly walking in, Bai Qiu's placid and expressionless face slowly turned into surprise, which grew to become sheer and utter shock. That face that was so familiar, yet also unfamiliar to him at the same time. Bai Qiu had never thought that he would be able to see her again, and he was too surprised to react for a while, unable to respond when the woman called out to him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Seeing that, Qing Lanfei curved up her lips and smiled. Sect leader Bai, we've not seen each other for many long years. Do you not recognize me anymore? That was when Bai Qiu managed to snap back to his senses. Miss Qing? Didn't you already die? Qing Lanfei piped in with a laugh. I have indeed died once. But I must be extremely blessed as I managed to come back to life. Bai Qiu could not help but gasp before he said, back when news of your death spread, it was seen to be such a great loss to the entire cloud heaven. After all, with your unparalleled skills in healing and medicine, you were known as the devil's hand capable of growing flesh back onto bones. Sect leader Bai is too kind with his words. I have not practiced medicine for many years, and have grown highly rusty at it. The corners of Qing Lanfei's lips lifted, as she said in an emotionless tone. Chapter 254. 3. Heavenly Eye destroyed by Qiu was also an intelligent man, and sensed that the woman did not want to speak of the past, so he did not probe any further on that but asked, I wonder what brought Miss Qing here to the Divine Healer sect. Qing Lanfei nodded and replied, Truth be told, I came here this time to seek for your help in a particular matter. Please be candid. Miss Qing has shown the Divine Healer sect benevolence back in the past, so as long as it is in my power, I will not refuse you. Bai Qiu said with a serious expression on his face. I hope to be able to stay here in the Divine Healer sect for a short period. Qing Lanfei opened her mouth to say, Is that all? Bai Qiu looked surprised, seemingly not expecting that this was what the woman him to help her with. You did not even have to ask. As long as you want to, the Divine Healer sect will always welcome you here. Bai Qiu, always stoic face that was usually not prone to smiling, actually smiled earnestly at the woman. Bai Qiu was a man who was always upright and plain-spoken, candid and straightforward, never bowing his head against pressure from other powers. He only sought to attain more profound levels in healing and medicine his entire life, and the people he admired the most were those who possessed unsurpassed skills in medicine. And standing there right before his eyes was one among the rare few people that he respected and admired greatly. Qing Lanfei's eyes then flashed with a glint before she slowly went on to say, I do not want to hide it from you. I am actually hiding from persecution from one of the major powers. As those people will be apprehensive against offending the Divine Healer sect, that is why. So I see. Bai Qiu did not wait for her to finish, but interrupted her words with a smile. Set your mind at ease and just stay here. I will get rid of those bothersome tales that are coming after you. The Divine Healer sect might not be able to help you in other areas, but making a few people disappear will be an easy and effortless task for us. What Bai Qiu was speaking about was one of the Divine Healer sect's highly close-kept secrets. The territory where the Divine Healer sect sat seemed completely normal and ordinary, no different from any other place throughout the lower realms. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The place had simple tea houses and restaurants, the streets lined with hawkers calling out their wares, where one was even able to see beggars lying asleep at street corners everywhere. But under all that all too familiar-looking sight lay something not as simple as everything that meets the eye. A random child squatting on the street to play with crickets could possibly be a killer capable of murdering a person through horrifying means. It must be known that people who have benefited from the grace of the Divine Healer sect numbered all the way into millions. And among these people, some of them had sought to repay the benevolence received, or were drawn to the warm and hospitable people of these lands to end up settling themselves into this place. Over time, their numbers grew larger and larger. The place was filled with many concealed masters with unsurpassing skills, an existence where their skills were passed down over the generations to protect the Divine Healer sect. So if anyone came here with unfriendly intentions, these people would naturally not let them go free that easily. Chapter 254. 4. Heavenly Eye destroyed Bright Moon Temple. Although Qing Luoyan had not had any more dreams after that night, everything that happened had felt so real, and she was still unable to forget it. Even with the aid of the incense that promoted sleep, she was able to find peaceful rest. A brocade box was placed on the table, and a red strip of high-quality cloth lay quietly inside. Her long, slender fingers slowly went to pick it up, and then rubbed it between her fingers. She had plucked it off from the tree branch that night. How could it possibly be that coincidental? Or was it not just a dream, but all of that had really happened? If not, then how do you explain this thing here? Qing Luo Yan unconsciously knitted her brows together, and her fingers clenched up tightly. A soft knocking then came in from outside at that moment. Temple Lord. It was Song Jian who had come. Qing Luo Yan slowly relaxed the grip on her hands before she placed the strip of cloth back into the brocade box. She then opened her mouth to call out, "Come in." Song Jian pushed on the door and came inside, bowing respectfully at the waist in greeting. "May I ask if the Temple Lord has summoned Song Jian here for something important you need me to do? I had a dream a few nights ago." Qing Luo Yan went on to roughly describe the scene of her dream to him, and then asked, "I want to know whether all that really happened, or is someone secretly playing some tricks?" Song Jian contemplated deeply for a moment before he opened his mouth to say, "Will the Temple Lord please give me a moment?" Hearing that, he walked slowly over to the window and looked up into the stars in the sky. He then closed his eyes and executed a series of signs with his fingers very quickly. A faint silver glow appeared between his brows, and if one looked carefully, the glow seemed to be in the shape of an eye. It looked like everyone who cultivated in the study of priesthood had an heavenly eye to pry into the past and future. But every time that skill was used, especially those who violated its laws to use it for immoral ends, the user would suffer backlash as punishment. Because Song Jian had used his heavenly eye to pry into too many things he should not know about, his cultivation journey had become more and more difficult. Unable to make any progress at all for several hundred years, but find that his powers were slowly deteriorating instead. Song Jian kept his eyes closed and focused his energy to immerse himself into it, trying his best to sense everything. But just as he was about to sense something, he suddenly saw a person reveal a strange and cryptic smile at the corners of their lips. It was not known what happened after that, but his eyes suddenly lost their luster like he had gone blind, as he felt sharp pain stabbing him right between his brows. He was suddenly unable to see anything with his normal eyes, and it was a good long while before his sight was returned to clarity. When he peered around, he was not able to see any traces of what he had glimpsed just now. He could not help but become rather flustered, but when he turned around his face was calm and composed. Without any change in his expression, he went on to say, "Temple Lord, I did not see anything suspicious, but it seems like that was just a coincidence. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, is that so?" Qing Luo Yan furrowed her brows, looking a little doubtful. But since that was what he told her, she had no reason to suspect otherwise, thinking that he wouldn't dare to lie to her anyway. "You can be dismissed." Qing Luo Yan waved her hand impatiently. Song Jian acknowledged his orders and retreated, but the moment he stepped outside, his face turned deathly pale all of a sudden, and he quickly shuffled his way back to his chambers. He flipped at the books frantically, seeking to find records that reflected how to get a priest's heavenly eye can be restored. How can he possibly be unable to see? Why is he suddenly unable to see at a time like this? That cannot happen. Qing Luo Yan was already fed up with him, and if he were to lose his heavenly eye and his priestly powers, she would definitely dump him without a moment's hesitation. Chapter 255. 1. See who puts on a greater show, but the more anxious his actions were, the more he didn't know what to do. Frustration welled up in his heart, as the ancient texts were tossed all over the place in the room. In the end, he still could not find anything related to restoring one's heavenly eye. A look of fear and panic came to show on Song Jian's face. Could he have really lost his heavenly eye powers? How can that be? How could he possibly lose the ability that he was most proud of his entire life? The thought that he would forever become an entirely useless person, losing his very last bit of usefulness, and would be abandoned by Qing Luo Yan without hesitation, or even mercilessly executed, he could not help but break out in a bout of cold sweat on his back. He knew too many secrets that he was not supposed to know about, and although he had always admired Qing Luo Yan, he knew deep down in his heart just how cold and hard her heart was, and she would never consider sparing his life for old time's sake. When that thought came to mind, Song Jian's face turned ashen and defeated, Just as he was wrecked with despair and hopelessness, his mind suddenly thought of something, and a glint flashed in his eyes. Wait a minute. Maybe, just maybe there is a way for him to salvage the situation. He was not able to find a way to restore his heavenly eye here, but there is a place that he just might be able to. And the culprit who secretly destroyed his heavenly eye had probably expected that he would be coming, and was already waiting idly in the scroll chambers, holding a duster with a serious look on her face, dusting away the non-existent dust in that place. Song Jian has arrived. After Qi Yu turned into a spiritual form, although her cultivation powers became weak, her other senses turned exceptionally sharp. She had sensed movement nearby, and she immediately voiced out what she discovered. Qing Yu raised her brows, like she had already expected that someone would be coming, her face not seeming the least bit surprised. She turned to the woman and said, "You should hide yourself." Once her voice fell, she gave her sleeve a slight wave, and kept the translucent spirit into her personal dimensional space. The next moment, the sound of footsteps slowly approached, and the tall figure in blue priest robes of Song Jian appeared before her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There were people allocated to the scroll chambers here before, but they had probably been transferred out in order to test Qing Yu, leaving her to be the only person placed here. When Song Jian arrived, what he saw was a young lady in pink uniform of an attendant, conscientiously dusting away at nothing, though what Song Jian saw was just empty space, unable to see anything at all. Looking at the young lady, she seemed to be carefully dusting the empty air, as she waved the duster lightly in her hand, making for a rather comical sight. But Song Jian did not think that she was pretending. He knew this young lady was extraordinary, and he had been able to tell from the first moment that he saw her. Moreover, the first day she came to the scroll chambers, she was already able to see the things in the place, and have rearranged all the mess of scrolls back into their original places without error. Chapter 255. 2. See who puts on a greater show. The commotion that had erupted when that happened had been felt in all corners of the divine temple. But she was clearly just a young lady brought back from the lower realms, but she possessed such incredible abilities, which was rather astounding. Song Jian's eyes turned dark, and he deepened his voice to call out to the young lady, "Qing Yu." The ends of Qing Yu's lips lifted up in an almost imperceptible arc, before she immediately hid it away that very same instant. With an earnest look on her face that made her look so innocent and harmless, Qing Yu turned herself around slowly, like she had only just noticed Song Jian's arrival. She looked a little surprised as she asked, "Why has the Grand Priest come here?" I came here to see whether you've settled yourself improperly. After all, Lord Yufan did ask us to take good care of you." Song Jian did not immediately reveal the reason he had come here, but went on to show the young lady some concern. Qing Yu laughed silently to herself inside. This fella can really hold it, and can't he? But since he is not anxious about it, she can naturally be even more nonchalant than him. "I thank the Grand Priest for his concern. I am doing great here. There are so many interesting books here, and reading them has been highly beneficial to me. The Grand Priest, you have really been too kind to me, letting me come to such a great place, which will help me raise my cultivation level as well. I am truly touched by the gesture." Song Jian listened to the young lady ramble on, and the smile on his face began to look a little ugly, feeling like his heart was bleeding. As expected, the young lady was able to see the scrolls and text. He had originally sought to secretly test her, to see if she had any relations with that person. But right at the moment, even after she was being tested, he really did not care anymore, whether she was related to that person or not. What was most important to him now was to find ancient texts related to restoring one's heavenly eye, as without the heavenly eye ability as a priest, how was he going to maintain his footing here in the divine temple? He might not even be able to survive in cloud heaven at all. He took a deep breath, and then interrupted the young lady. "It's good that you like it here. You mentioned that there are many interesting books here. I wonder what books you've managed to read?" His words felt like he was testing waters. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Of course he could not possibly ask too directly. If the fact that he was unable to see the scroll chambers was leaked, how was he going to be able to hold his own before the other priests? Hence, he could only take a circuitous approach like this, seeking to garner some useful information from there. Qingyu could not help but find it rather funny. This Song Jian really thought that she was that dumb, not knowing that Qingyu had already told her everything. But since he asked, she would naturally not want to disappoint him. The young lady's luscious eyes turned crafty before they turned up into two smiley crescents as she opened her mouth to say, "There are many interesting books. Some tell of strange and incredible occurrences that happened in the realm, records of unworldly precious treasures, unmatched spirit artifacts and fighting techniques, and even information on the hidden lairs of all kinds of spirit beasts as well." Chapter 255. 3. See who puts on a greater show. The expression on Qingyu's tiny face was exuberant and overflowing with excitement, like she was fully immersed and highly absorbed into what she was talking about. But Song Jian had to listen to her ramble on, a whole tirade of unimportant things, and he almost could not maintain that smile he kept on his face. Qingyu pretended like she did not see anything, and continued to take him on a wild, senseless ride, describing a whole lot of things that she thought were interesting. Since the man asked her in such a nonchalant manner, she just picked at whatever came to mind and prattled on without much thought. Although anger rose up in Song Jian's heart, there was nothing he could say, for no other reason than the fact that though the young lady was telling him things that were absolutely useless to him, everything she mentioned was really within those scrolls and texts, and not things that she made up out of nowhere. He had once arranged these scrolls and ancient texts in the past, and at least half of what Qingyu spoke about were from records that he had seen before. He remained silent for a while more before he slowly spoke. "Qingyu, you're an intelligent child. I think that I do not need to continue to put up a pretense before you anymore." Qingyu raised an eyebrow and looked at the man in puzzlement. Song Jian's eyes dimmed, and he only came to speak in a low voice after a long pause. "To tell you the truth, in order to stop traitors from destroying the divine temple, I used some forbidden techniques and sustained severe injuries. Because of that, I am now unable to gain entry into the scroll chamber anymore." He has admitted it. But why are the words he is telling her different from what she heard previously? The traitor has now turned into the hero, who was gravely injured when he saved the divine temple? How interesting. Qingyu's face was suddenly filled with shock. That astounded face looked so very natural, and one would not be able to tell that it was feigned. Something like that really happened. Grand Priest, you made such a great sacrifice for the sake of the divine temple, which is really so admirable. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Song Jian was unable to see through the young lady's exquisite acting, and being gazed upon by those adoring eyes filled with such admiration, he actually straightened up his back in pride. That is merely what a grand priest must do. But he still had not forgotten his real purpose in coming here. He turned to the young lady and said, "It's like this. I am thinking that you might be able to help me see if there are any books that will be of any help in the pursuit of priesthood. As I am unable to see them, can I trouble you to copy the related texts and give them to me thereafter? Rest assured, Grand Priest, I will surely do my best to help you." The young lady said with a highly serious expression on her face, "I will have to trouble you then." After the appropriate arrangements were made, Song Jian felt as if a huge rock had been lifted off his chest, and he immediately felt a lot lighter. Chapter 255. 4. See who puts on a greater show. The corners of Qingyu's lips were tinged with a faint mocking smile, as she watched the man's back gradually disappear. Within this scroll chambers, is there really a scroll that tells one how to restore the heavenly eye? It was not known when Qingyu had come out from the dimensional space, and she was looking at Qingyu with a complicated expression on her face. "Are you really going to help him?" Qingyu turned her gaze around and said with a faint smile on her lips, "Help. I will naturally help him, but whether he has the fortitude to recover his power will depend entirely on himself." But Qingyu had never given people any hope for redemption when she made her move. There were indeed a good number of mystical ancient scrolls in the scroll chambers that contained records on ways to restore a priest's heavenly eye. But unfortunately, the method she was going to use was something she learnt from the heavenly insights into medicine, where not only was its power highly damaging, absolutely no one else, but just Qingyu herself would be able to help Song Jian save his eye throughout the entire realm. The ancient text that was the sacred treasure of the greatest secret family, hidden from her previous world, was not something that could be unraveled easily. That day, Bai Ziyan set out from the Dark Lands, and it took him about a half-day's time to arrive at the Divine Healer sect's territory. He had been feeling puzzled, and had deliberated throughout the entire journey, just what Lu Junyao really had up his sleeve. Why had he suddenly been so kind to send him back home to go see how his parents were doing out of the blue, and had even asked him to send his regards to them? That was not the strangest thing. What was most strange to him on this trip back to his hometown was that he had to bring this kid along with him. Why? And that fella had put it so nicely that the kid should be exposed to the beautiful scenery in Cloud Heaven's various territories. Based on Bai Ziyan understanding of a certain someone, he just could not help feeling that that fellow was definitely up to no good. He thought back and forth about it as he glanced at the youth beside him through narrowed eyes and said, "Why does he want me to bring you along?" Hearing that, Qing Bei's face was expressionless as he looked at the man. "How am I supposed to know? He did not tell you the reason?" Bai Ziyan was a little surprised. "Read latest chapters at Wuxia World," Qing Bei said tonelessly. "He only said that I should come out to get exposure and familiarize myself with the way of life in Cloud Heaven." "Is that all?" Bai Ziyan just cannot reconcile his thoughts, and he gave up thinking any further on it, as they had made good time on their journey and had come to the Divine Healer sect's main gates. It must be said that Bai Ziyan was quite pitiful. The number of times he came back here throughout so many years was less than you can count on one hand. He would usually not come back unless it was something urgent, as they did not want to invite gossip in case anyone found out about it. The last time he came back here was with Lu Junyao, and he had been mercilessly tormented by the array set by the hand of his own father. This time he had grown smarter. He was not going to announce his arrival loudly, but just went ahead to put his hand on the bronze ring on the main doors, and gave it 2 light taps. Chapter 256. 1. "He looks so much like my son." After a few moments, someone answered from inside, and the door was slowly opened. The person who opened the door was a tall and good-looking young man. When he saw the man with such an enchanting countenance standing outside, he was taken back a moment by surprise. His eyes were wide with shock as he turned his head to cast a careful glance inside before he asked softly, "Young lord, why have you suddenly returned?" Bai Ziyan arched up an eyebrow and gave the man a measuring glance. "What? I need to report back in advance, before coming back to my own home? Why are you acting so furtively for?" Sensing the displeasure in Bai Ziyan's tone, the man quickly shook his head and said, "That is not what I mean. Young lord, don't get angry yet, and let me explain. We have a couple of guests who came here to the sect some time ago, and it seems like they are on rather good terms with the sect leader. So the sect leader has been in a rather good mood recently. I am just afraid that if the young lord were to get into an argument with the sect leader, it would not be nice to have the guests witness that." The pair had been father and son for such a long time, and almost everyone in the Divine Healer sect knew how the two of them got along with each other. That was the reason why that man was being so cautious. Hearing that, Bai Ziyan's curiosity was piqued. To think that such an inflexible and stern person, like his father, would actually come to have close friends. How come he did not know anything about that? To the extent that he was unwilling to even see his own son? With that thought in mind, Bai Ziyan curved his lips up in a smile. "You do not have to worry about that at all. I did not come back here to pick a fight with him. I was just young and immature in the past, and I am no longer as rash as I was before." He really wanted to see who those guests were. Bai Ziyan turned his head around to look at the youth behind him. "Kid, you have better keep close to me." Qing Bei nodded, indicating that he would. It was only at that moment that the man from the Divine Healer sect came to notice that there was a youth standing behind Bai Ziyan. The youth was rather thin, and Bai Ziyin blocked the youth out completely earlier, so he had not seen the boy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although the youth was together with their young lord, but he still had not forgotten that the Divine Healers sect was not a place that allowed outsiders into their grounds easily, and he went on to ask, "This young master here is?" "It's all right. This young lad is like a younger brother to me, and can be considered to be one of us." Bai Ziyin waved his hand dismissively as he spoke, and he immediately led Qing Bei to go inside together with him. At that same moment, Bai Qiu was entertaining his guests, Qing Lanfei and Mo Jingyu, in a quaint and elegant pavilion that offered a serene and peaceful view. It was only after that day when Qing Lanfei came to the Divine Healer sect that Bai Qiu came to be aware that the elixir cultivator, who was widely known and highly revered in Cloud Heaven, was now actually married to this man in front of him. Chapter 256. 2. He looks so much like my son, but though hundreds of years had passed, time had not left a single trace upon that face of hers, her countenance looking exactly the same as the young lady she was before, so it was no wonder that he was surprised to discover that fact. Qing Lanfei had a smile on her lips as she said in a soft voice, "Sect leader Bai, you must have so many things you need to deal with on a day-to-day basis, so you really do not need to come pay us a visit so often. I am already very grateful that you are willing to extend a helping hand to us. Miss Qing need not worry about that. Things in the Divine Healer sect can be said to have been rather peaceful in recent years, and there aren't that many things for me to do. But there is one request that I might need to make of you if I may." Bai Qiu said with a sigh, looking a little helpless. "Oh." Qing Lanfei raised an eyebrow. She had always had a quick mind, and she immediately thought of something upon hearing that. Could it have something to do with the Mind-Free Peak? Miss Qing is really as smart as I thought. Bai Qiu then paused for a moment, his eyes raising up to look at the woman smiling beautifully at him before he said, "I hope that Miss Qing can take the place of that unfilial son of mine, and go to the Mind-Free Peak, as the Divine Healer sect's representative." In the time that Qing Lanfei had stayed here in the Divine Healer sect, she had also heard of this son of Bai Qiu's. He was the most gifted and talented elixir cultivator the Divine Healer sect had seen in 100 years, and it was said that his skills had already surpassed that of the sect leader, Bai Qiu's. But he had committed some wrong, and was eventually thrown out of the place. She did not know very much about it, but just the bits that people mentioned to her in idle chit-chat. But here was Bai Qiu asking her to take his son's place to go into the Mind-Free Peak. Wouldn't that be a little inappropriate? To be honest with you, besides the few elders and myself here, though the Divine Healer sect still has a good number of capable talents among the younger generation of disciples. Bai Qiu's face seemed to become clouded with an ugly shade as he continued to say through tightly clenched teeth, "Not a single one of them can match up to even one half of that rascal's skills. Me and my elderly bunch of old fogies will not be allowed entry into Mind-Free Peak, and so I can only come ask for Miss Qing's help." Qing Lanfei understood what the man was asking of her, and the expression on her face looked rather helpless as she started to reply. "But I am not a member of the Divine Healer sect. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. How will that even matter? I will just need to." Sect leader Bai. The man who had not said a single word all this time suddenly spoke up, to interrupt Bai Qiu's words. Qing Lanfei also turned to look in surprise at the man beside her. What does this fella intend to say? Mo Jingyu then went on to say slowly, "My apologies, but I fear that Fei Heir will not be able to agree to your request." Chapter 256. 3. He looks so much like my son. Bai Qiu was taken aback a moment, his face looking a little shocked. "Jingyu, have you forgotten that you are now a person with a deficient soul? Moreover, your cultivation now is not even half of the level you had before. How could I possibly let you go risk yourself in the Mind-Free Peak?" Mo Jingyu's eyes were emotionless, his tone strangely calm and composed. Big Brother had got Xiao Yiran to bring him back to the Hell King's palace, because Big Brother had similarly wanted him to go into the mind-free peak. He was naturally not fearful of the unknown dangers inside that place, but as he was no longer alone on his own now, he did not want to put himself at unnecessary risk. Hence, he did not want Fei Er to go risk herself as well. Hearing that, Qing Lanfei narrowed her eyes and her lips stiffened, but she did not say anything. Bai Qiu did not insist further when he saw that. He had initially thought that there was no harm giving it a try, so being rejected like this did not cause him all that much disappointment. As the man spoke, a disciple suddenly came in and lowered his head to whisper something into Bai Qiu's ear. The expression on Bai Qiu's face became a little startled before it turned to look a little complicated. He suddenly shot to his feet and then smiled apologetically at the two people as he said, "Something came up and I have to recuse myself for a while. I'll leave you two to carry on your own. Please take your time, sect leader Bai." Qing Lanfei nodded and said with a smile, watching Bai Qiu as he slowly went further away from them. Mo Jingyu then opened his mouth to ask the woman, "You would not blame me for refusing his request on your behalf just now, would you?" Qing Lanfei arched up her eyes and smiled gently at him. "You were merely being concerned about me. Why would I blame you for that?" Mo Jingyu's upslanted eyes glanced at her before he said to her, "Compared to the past, you are now becoming so much more understanding. Are you saying that I was being unreasonable in the past?" Qing Lanfei arched up an eyebrow, her face looking highly displeased as she asked, "Read latest chapters at Wuxia World?" Mo Jingyu blinked his eyes innocently, his face looking highly aggrieved. "That is not what I said at all." Qing Lanfei could not help but laugh as she raised up a balled fist to thump against the man's shoulder. After the show of affection, she suddenly opened her mouth to say to the man, "Actually, even if I do not go to the mind-free peak this time, I will still want to make my way there in future. I can't help but have this feeling. That place is strangely drawing me to it very strongly." It seemed like there was a fuzzy memory lodged in her mind, but every time she tried to remember it, her head would be wrecked with a splitting headache, sometimes growing so severe that she would even faint. She had never once spoken about it before, but when she came to hear that name, Mind-Free Peak, for the first time, she had immediately felt like she had heard of it before. And there were some things that she would have to first unravel the entire mystery before she would believe it. Chapter 256. 4. He looks so much like my son. Mo Jingyu stretched his hand out to gently smoothen out the crease between her brows and said in a tender voice, "Wait till your soul has been fully returned to its complete state, and have recovered your cultivation. I will then go with you." Qing Lanfei answered softly, before leaning herself onto the man's embrace. Bai Jiyan had gone to the main hall to go see his father, and had originally asked Qing Bei to just remain there. Upon further thought, seeing that it might not be such a good idea to have Qing Bei around when the father and son met, Qing Bei quickly made up an excuse that he wanted to go walk around. Upon seeing that, Bai Jiyan then called in a disciple from the sect to bring the youth around, in case he came to stumble upon any traps or arrays set up within the grounds. "You're a friend of our young lord's? You look very young. Have you yet come of age?" The disciple accompanying him did not look to be very old as well, and was such a chatterbox, incessantly finding something to talk to him about. Qing Bei did not get impatient with him, but answered all his questions one by one. But his personality was one that wasn't really that extroverted, and would usually not speak all that much with people he was not familiar with. The disciple came to discover that rather uninteresting character of the youth, and he then gradually spoke a lot less to him. Qing Bei had naturally noticed that the young disciple seemed a little unenthused with accompanying him, and he paused a moment before he opened his mouth to say, "I will be fine walking around on my own, and will be going right back in just a short while. You do not need to accompany me if you have things to do." The disciple was naturally delighted to hear that, but he put on an expression like he was in a rather difficult position. "But the young lord said that I was to bring you around." "It's all right. I will explain it to him, and he will not place any blame on you," Qing Bei said reassuringly. "I will have to trouble the young master to do that then." Upon saying that, the disciple immediately turned around and left. Qing Bei's eyes narrowed slightly, and the expression on his face clouded over for a very brief instant. He wondered how Qingyu was doing now. He had come to Cloud Heaven for almost an entire month, but he still had not met her a single time. Although Lu Junyao told him that Qingyu was safe, but was just unable to show herself temporarily, he could not help but still feel worried. Maybe it was because the two of them had never been separated from each other for such a long period of time before. Any pair of twins would always share a kind of special link between their consciousness, and their relationship was always closer than it was between regular siblings. That was because they had once been kept very close to each other in their mother's womb, and were born together one right after the other. Moreover, they had been at each other's side growing up. They only had each other to rely on all this time, and that made them treasure each other even more. Hence, before he was able to see her with his own eyes, he just could not set his heart at ease completely. Unknowingly, he did not know where he had come to, having walked with his head lowered down in thought. He furrowed his brows, and he suddenly heard someone speaking in a soft voice. "I really can't help but wonder how those two children are doing now." It was a gentle-sounding woman's voice that carried a tinge of helpless regret. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You don't worry, I'm sure they are fine. After all, seeds born from such exemplary and outstanding people like us could not possibly turn out to be nobodies. A man's deep and magnetic voice said with a laugh. I hope so. Qing Bei unconsciously overheard their conversation, and he immediately wanted to turn around and leave. But he was probably in too much of a rush, as he did not see a small rock on the ground, and he stepped right onto it. That piece of rock was clearly a switch that sprung some kind of trap. His foot had just stepped onto the rock when it immediately sank deep into the ground. A howling wind suddenly appeared overhead, which lunged straight towards Qing Bei. Qing Bei stood there staring with his eyes wide. Chapter 257. 1. Child, father and mother loves you. What surged straight towards him was a thick black misty cloud, and hidden within that mist seemed to be some head-numbingly terrifying creatures, their eyes a deep crimson, that looked extraordinarily evil and frightening. Qing Bei's body reacted instinctively, and he immediately summoned up a light purple force field as a protective shield, keeping the black mist isolated outside. He heard a sizzling sound like meat being cooked coming from the shield's surface, but the creatures did not seem to know fear, endlessly slamming their bodies onto the shield, their numbers uncountable. The expression on Qing Bei's face turned grave as he knitted his brows together. What are these things? If things continued to go on endlessly like this, his energy would slowly be depleted. But he did not know what those things were at all, so he did not dare to attack them carelessly. But remaining in that situation was not a viable option as well. Just at that moment, when his thoughts were distracted for a moment, a corner of the shield was broken through by one of the black creatures. The youth's bright clear eyes flashed with a dark glint, and he gathered a golden red flame in the palm of his hand, before hurling it straight at the spot where his shield had been broken. In the next instant, a pitiful shriek rang out, as the golden red flames lit up the skies, even though it was in the middle of the day. The people closest to him at that moment were none other than Mo Jingyu and Qing Lanfei, seated under the pavilion a short distance away. The spirit energy that somehow felt so comfortingly familiar caused Qing Lanfei's heart to skip a beat. She looked up into the sky that glowed brightly with fiery light, and her face turned into shock. Jingyu, is that glow from the spirit power of the flame element? Her voice was filled with utter disbelief, and it might be because her powers had deteriorated that caused her to be gripped by uncertainty for a moment. Mo Jingyu's gaze was also staring into the same spot, and his eyes flashed with a light inside. Gold and red spirit energy, that is indeed the flame element. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although they were in Cloud Heaven, that highly unique type elemental power had almost become extinct. In the 700 years that he had lived before he came to meet his Fey heir, he had never ever encountered anyone who possessed the flame element. Revered as the most talented young woman in Cloud Heaven back then, having attained the highest realm of her powers at the young tender age of 17, she had gained everlasting youth from then on, her looks unchanged though a few hundred years had passed. her countenance frozen in time, when she had remained to be such an intoxicating beauty, the subject of envy of countless other women. Not to mention that she was blessed with 5 different elemental powers the moment she was born. Her spirit powers had then come to undergo an unexpected transformation that made her gain a completely brand new kind of elemental power. It was only sporadically mentioned in ancient texts, and people only knew that it was called the flame element, the glow of its spirit power a mesh of gold and red. It gave the wielder the self-healing ability, and the blood from people who possessed the flame element could be used to save others. As long as a person was still breathing, then there was a chance the blood could save him. Chapter 257. 2. Child, father and mother loves you, and now, besides Fei Air, another person with the flame element had appeared. But from what was seen, that person's flame element's power had not been brought to its full potential, otherwise the effects would not be so weak. He had seen with his own eyes in the past when Fei Air had summoned the powers of the flame element, and witnessed its magnificent power. It could only be termed as nothing else but terrifying, completely different from what was on Mo Jingyu's mind, when Qing Lan Fei felt the comfortingly familiar ripple of spirit power in the air. What rose up within her heart was not shock. No one but herself knew it better than her. Throughout the entire world, besides her alone, the mutated flame element she possessed had never ever appeared on another person. For someone to be able to possess the flame element, it could only have been brought out from within her body, inherited from her bloodline. Qing Lan Fei's eyes immediately turned red at the rims. She was not even able to explain anything to the man standing beside her, when her feet were already subconsciously bringing her towards the direction of the brilliant glow. And on the other side, Qing Bei had merely summoned up a little of the flame element's powers that caused the mass of black mist to retreat. The strange creature seemed to be highly fearful, and like a receding tide, it dissipated and dispersed into nothing, without a single trace of it left behind. The gently handsome youth lowered his head and stared into his palm, his mind thinking whether he had gotten himself into trouble with that. That creature could have been something that the Divine Healer sect had put in place to guard against intruders, and he had killed a great big half of them. It's all right, he will just apologize and own up to it at most, as he was brought in here by Bai Jiyan, so the man will definitely help him if he was to be blamed. He was not feeling that worried with that though in mind, and was about to rack his mind on how to find his way back. The moment he lifted his head up, he was met with a pair of gentle-looking eyes, slightly misted over with what could very well be tears. It was an extremely beautiful-looking woman, wearing a bright red dress that was like the color of dusk, making the beautiful scenery around her become just an accompanying background. She was standing barely 10 steps distance away, quietly looking at him. Qing Bei raised an eyebrow in surprise, feeling a little puzzled. This person felt a little familiar somehow, but he had never met her before. His feet that had wanted to leave the place unconsciously planted themselves firmly on the ground. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, both of them standing there to gaze at each other, just a short distance apart. Are you little Bei? Qing Lan Fei asked hesitantly, her eyes red. Qing Bei was taken aback. You are. He had not forgotten that this was in Cloud Heaven, a realm that was of a higher level than the constellation continent. So why would anyone know him at all? But this woman did not look like she meant him any harm, and she felt rather comfortingly familiar. Chapter 257. 3. Child, father and mother loves you. A smile slowly came onto Qing Lan Fei's lips as she said, My child, the powers you just summoned up. Was it the flame element? How did you know that? Qing Bei's eyes immediately flared wide, and the expression on his face quickly grew wary. Qing Yu had told him before that the possession of their elemental power must be kept secret, and unless it was absolutely necessary, they must not use its power, or to reveal it to others. But he had merely summoned up just a little bit of the flame element's power, just now, and someone had immediately recognized it. Qing Lan Fei looked at the wary deer-like expression on the youth's face, and her heart winced for a moment. She kept her smile on her face as she said, Do you know where the flame element originated from? It first manifested from a mutation of elemental spirit powers, a variant element that came to be formed. Throughout the entire cloud heaven, none other me possessed spirit powers with this element. Qing Lanfei's expression grew more gentle. Both you and your sister has the flame element's power in your bodies, and that is because you both inherited it from my blood. When that voice fell, Qingbei looked like he had been struck by an immense force, his face immediately turning pale. You. His lips moved, but he could not utter another word, but just stood there staring foolishly at the woman, unable to come back to his senses. The very next second, the woman who had been more than 10 steps distance away suddenly appeared right before him in a blink, her hands stretched out gently to hold the youth in a tender embrace. A melodious-sounding voice that was tinged with a bit of raspiness then said, "My child, Mother is finally able to see you again. You've grown up safe and sound, and that is the most comforting thing to have ever happened to me." Till the moment that he was hugged in the woman's arms, Qingbei had been caught in a stunned daze. What is happening here? Mother? Has he hurt her wrongly? He suddenly came back to his senses and quickly broke free from the woman's arms. His face was still carrying a shocked expression as he asked, "You are saying that you're my mother? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You brat. How dare you speak to your mother like that? How can that possibly be faked?" Seeing that it was a reunion of mother and child, Mo Jingyu had not wanted to disturb the tender moment. But when he saw the eyes of the woman he loved turning red around the rims, and looking so sad and sorrowful upon seeing that little brat doubt Qing Lanfei's real identity, Mo Jingyu could not help but step forward to speak. Qingbei saw that a man had suddenly appeared, and he jumped in shock once more. But when he saw the man's handsome countenance, he could not help but be stunned into a daze another time. It was for no other reason than the fact that the man's facial features with those long upslanted phoenix-like eyes were largely similar to his own, and that devilishly alluring glint in his eyes was a lot more like Qingyu's rather than himself. Upon thinking about Qingyu, his eyes unconsciously turned back to look at the red-clothed woman. Upon looking at her more closely, he found that she really looked very much like Qingyu. Chapter 257. For, child, father and mother loves you, but compared to the clear and distinctly flawless beauty of the woman, Qingyu possessed a more devilish allure, like people with two completely different personalities. No wonder he had found the woman so familiar looking. It was because she looked so much like Qingyu. And at that moment, the expression on his face was a little complicated as he slowly came to say, "You are really my parents." Lu Junyao must have already known that the two of them were here at this place, and that was why he had made Bai Ziyin bring him here, so that they could be reunited. But he had never thought that they would come to meet under such circumstances. He had known from a very young age that his mother was no longer around, and that was why he had always yearned to have Yen Su to cast his glance his way a little bit more. But when he came to discover that the man was not his biological birth father, that intense longing had gradually dissipated, and he was not so hung up on trying to impress the man anymore. Fortunately, Qingyu had always been at his side. Hence at that very instant, faced with his real parents standing right before him, he really did not know what to feel. Seeing the youth looking highly flustered and at a complete loss, Mo Jingyu sighed softly. As a man, he could only communicate the way a man knew how. He bumped his fist against the youth's shoulder and said, "Father and mother have let both of you down. But you have to know that if it was not because we really had no other choice, no parent under the heavens can bear to abandon their own flesh and blood." Qingbei's thin body stiffened for an instant as his hands clenched up into fists, but he did not say anything. Seeing the youth looking like that, Qing Lanfei's heart almost broke into pieces, but she did not know what she could say to comfort him. Mo Jingyu paused for a moment before he raised a large hand and stiffly placed it onto the youth's head. He ruffled the youth's hair rather tenderly and said in a soft voice, "Foolish child, shouldn't you at least give some kind of response? Don't you see how aggrieved your mother is standing there on the verge of tears? Give your father and mother here a chance to make it up to you, and our family will never part again from now on, all right?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was only until he finished saying those words that Qing Bei was able to react. He turned to look at Qing Lanfei and saw that the woman's eyes were red and misty, looking at him with longing and anticipation. He then carefully raised a hand up to help her wipe away her tears. "Mother, don't cry." That soft call of mother from the youth, however, came to break the dam inside Qing Lanfei, where her tears flowed down incessantly, unstoppable. No one else knew how relieved and ecstatic she had felt when she first heard the news that the 2 children she had sacrificed in order to save Jingyu were still alive. It wasn't as if she did not love her children, but she was really given no other options back then, and she had no choice but to make that heart-wrenching decision. And in that instant that she heard Qing Bei called her mother, it felt as if nothing else mattered. Chapter 258. 1. By Ji Yan. You might really be a pig at that moment. The 2 men became a little panicked, not knowing how to comfort Qing Lanfei, who had tears of joy flowing down her face. It took her a good while before she was able to calm herself down, where she then shook her head while laughing. "I'm all right. I am just feeling too happy." Qing Bei followed suit and came to reveal a smile on his face before he said, "It would have been great if Qingyu is here as well." Upon hearing that, Mo Jingyu immediately opened his mouth to ask, "What is that lass? Why isn't she with you? And how did you come to appear here in the Divine Healers sect?" There were just too many questions in his mind that he could not make head or tail of at all. He had clearly gotten news that they were still in the lower realms not that long ago, and all of a sudden, they have come up here into Cloud Heaven, where his son had even appeared here right before his eyes. That was what Qing Lanfei had wanted to as well, and she turned to look questioningly at the handsome-looking youth. "It's a long story," Qing Bei said with a helpless sigh. "We were recently still in the constellation continent when Qingyu suddenly went missing. Bai Ji Yin then brought me here to Cloud Heaven, and he told me that Qingyu had been abducted by one of the powers here in Cloud Heaven." Upon hearing that familiar-sounding name, Qing Lanfei was a little surprised. "Is this person you are speaking of the young lord of the Divine Healer sect?" If her memory served her correctly, there were many occasions that Bai Qiu had repeatedly mentioned that name. "That's him all right." Qing Bei nodded his head and replied. Qing Lanfei could not help but think it even more puzzling. Her brows knitted together as she continued to ask, "How did you come to be acquainted with the young lord of the Divine Healers sect?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She must not be blamed for thinking it rather bewildering. People who were from completely different realms suddenly crossing paths. That would sound rather incredulous to anyone. Qing Bei seemed to understand why his mother was so surprised, and he could not help but laugh aloud when he came to think about it. His face took on a rather mischievous look as he said, "Mother, it wasn't me at all. They were all Qingyu's friends, and that was how I came to know them. Not only that, I even got to know the great demon lord of the Darklands, Lu Junyao." As predicted, the moment he said that, the look on Qing Lanfei's face went beyond mere surprise. Her beautiful eyes widened up as she exclaimed, "You've even met that child, little June?" Carefully counting back on the time since she left Cloud Heaven, she had not seen that child for more than 100 years. He had been a young tender youth back then, and she wondered what he could have grown up into now. After she came awake, she had heard quite a bit about his exploits and knew that that child had gained a warmer and kinder disposition than before, seemingly more mature and steady in the manner he handled things. Chapter 258. 2. By Ji Yan. You might really be a pig, though his most powerful and fiercely loyal subordinates were regarded to be among Cloud Heaven's most evil renegades. She firmly believed that that blood-covered youth with his clear and untainted smile hid a certain kind of warmth inside that no one knew about. When we were in the constellation continent, we became indebted to him from the numerous times he helped us. He always claimed that he was an old acquaintance of Mother's, and that was why he was so concerned for us. Although Qing Bei was not entirely pleased that he had snatched away some of Qing Yu's attention away from him, he still told the truth, revealing things that must be said. Hearing that, the smile on the edges of Qing Lanfei's lips deepened. That child actually has a kind heart in him. We merely crossed each other's path briefly in the past, but he still remembers the kindness I showed him, and came to take such good care of you too. I must remember to thank you properly in future." Seeing what a good impression the man had left on his own mother, and hearing her sing his praises so much, Qingbei could not help but feel a little envious. "It's all right. Better not say anything bad about the man for now, or mother might think that he was being immature. Wait till mother finds out that the guy has napped her daughter away from her, and she will then see just how black-bellied that fella really was. And why is that last now exactly?" Watching the mother and son chatting amicably, Mo Jingyu considered it for a moment before he decided to interrupt them. Although he had seen his son, he wanted to meet his daughter a little more. After all, in the hearts of all fathers everywhere, they were usually a bit more inclined towards their little sweet gentle princesses. However, Qingbei shook his head and said, "I do not know exactly, but Lu Junyao told me that Qingyu is perfectly safe now, but is unable to leave the place right at this moment. Although I do not know what she is trying to do there. Qingyu has always been smart and intelligent, her mind full of ideas. Hence she will definitely be fine." The youth's words were filled with complete trust and admiration for his sister. Mo Jingyu was about to say something more when the father and son pair of Bai Qiu and Bai Jiyin came rushing over towards them, with several of the divine healer's sect's disciples in a flurry of hurried footsteps. They had probably heard the commotion earlier as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bai Jiyin was the first person to react, because if anything had happened to Qingbei, he might be thrown right out before he would be given a chance to explain. If the kid came to any harm here in this place, Lu Junyao will definitely kill him slowly when he goes back. "Kid, didn't I get someone to accompany you around? How did you come to trigger a trap?" Bai Jiyin heaved a big sigh of relief inside when he saw the youth standing there, thankfully still in one piece. But immediately after his worries faded away, he could not help but open his mouth to berate the youth. The kid is really just as troublesome as that last Qingyu. Coincidentally, the young disciple who accompanied Qingbei earlier was there as well. When he heard Bai Jiyan's words, he immediately lowered his head guiltily, as he cast an uneasy glance in Qingbei's direction. Chapter 258. 3. Bai Jiyan, you might really be a pig with that kid rat on him? But he was the one who asked him to leave earlier. Fortunately for him, Qingbei did not mention him, but just smiled and said, "I do not like having people follow me around and wanted to walk on my own. Isn't everything fine now? It would have been too late for regrets now if something had happened." Bai Jiyan said in a displeased tone. He had been focused only on Qingbei all this time, and it was only at that moment that he came to notice that there were two other people standing beside the youth. He had never met the man before, but the woman was someone quite familiar to him. Lu Junyao had kept the woman's flesh body hidden in the mountain behind the dark lands back then, and prohibited anyone from going into the place. But he had seen the flesh body quite a number of times, because he was often asked to check on its recovery status, due to his unsurpassed skills in medicine. But this was the first time he was seeing her alive before his eyes, and he was rather taken by that sight. "You are Aunt Lan?" The expression on Qing Lan Fei's face became rather surprised. "You know who I am? This child here is probably the rebellious and unorthodox, unfilial child Bai Qiu had mentioned before, the young lord of the divine healer sect, Bai Jiyan." Immediately following that, Bai Qiu could not help but be a little surprised when he heard their conversation. His rascally kid knows Qing Lan Fei? Bai Jiyan arched up a good-looking eyebrow and said with a smiley face, "I am a friend of Jun Yao's, and back when Jun Yao had wanted to preserve Aunt Lan's flesh body, I played quite a big part, you know. Hence, it is only natural that I am able to recognize Aunt Lan, but I must say that Aunt Lan looks more beautiful awake here than when asleep." Bai Jiyan had always been good with words and blessed with a likable and handsome-looking flesh shell. Those words caused Qing Lan Fei to quickly form a good impression of the man. "So that's how it is. Jun Air has a kind heart, and even the friends he makes are just as kind. Let me express my thanks to you here," Qing Lan Fei said with a gentle and amiable smile on her face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Aunt Lan does not have to stand on ceremony with me. Jun Yao often mentions how well this elder have treated him, and I have always admired you greatly. With that temper of his, I think only your words can reach into his head. The two people who had never met before chatted amicably like they were long-parted friends, and no one was able to get a single word in at all. Mo Jingyu had already heard that name too many times that day, and as Bai Qiu happened to be standing right next to him, he could not help but ask the sect leader. This person called Lu Junyao, just who is he exactly? Hearing that, Bai Qiu went on to explain. He is the current leader of the Dark Lands, a child that I happened to rescue on one of my expeditions long ago. He had quite a hard life, as both his parents were killed right before he was born. On her very last breaths, her mother fought to keep that child alive. I brought him back with me, and he grew up here in the Divine Healers sect till he reached 15 years of age. He suddenly came to bid farewell to me one day, but did not tell me the reason that he was leaving. It was some time later that I found out that he left here to go exact revenge. Chapter 258. 4. By Ji Yan. You might really be a pig. All those people who murdered his parents, every single person in the clan, not even the lives of animals and livestock were spared. The entire clan was purged, cleaned out in their own blood. With the strength of one lone man, he massacred an entire clan. After that passed, he did not come back to the Divine Healers sect. He wandered around in cloud heavens for a few years, and when things grew tumultuous and chaotic, he then established the Dark Lands, which took Cloud Heaven by storm. They stood towering over several great mighty powers in Cloud Heaven, and have not fallen from its throne for 100 years. That man is a powerful character with a great and intelligent mind. Bai Qiu's evaluation of the man could be said to be extremely high, although he did not know much of the man. But just by the fact that he was able to assume that seat right at the pinnacle of power at such a young age, he was definitely not just an ordinary man. And the evil reputation of the Dark Lands was something that no one did not know about. As the demonic lord of an unorthodox sect, and Fei Er was still saying he had a kind heart. Just where did she see that in him? Mo Jingyu came to feel a little perplexed. Those two people were still happily chatting away, and when Bai Jiyan knew that Qing Bei was reunited with his parents, it was inevitable that they would come to speak of Qingyu. But Bai Jiyan's mouth was at times a little too loose, and he just presumed that Qing Bei had told his parents everything. So he said a little too uninhibitedly, Aunt Lan does not have to worry at all. That last Qingyu is really smart, so how could she possibly lose out at all? Moreover, Jun Yao dotes on her like she's his little ancestor. He was already so protective of her back when we were down there in the lower realm, and now that we've come up to Cloud Heaven, he is even going to look for the lass every night, only coming back just before dawn. Haha, I think he just cannot hold himself back, but want to go warm the blanket for the little lass. When he spoke about that, he even sniggered slyly for a moment. Listening to the man up till that point, Qing Wanfei started to feel that something did not sound right somewhere, and she did not know how to react for a moment. But Mo Jingyu's face turned dark. What did you say? Warm her blanket? Bai Jiyan had spoken a little too quickly, and Qing Bei was not able to stop the man even if he wanted to. There was nothing he could do, but silently shifted himself a little further away from the man. He felt that his father might jump up in thunderous rage. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But Bai Jiyan was still standing there oblivious like a fool, not knowing what was going as he continued to spill the beans. That's right. And he thinks that I do not know anything about it. How can I not know what he is thinking? That lass is well blessed with her looks, and is smart and capable. How could he possibly be able to stop himself from wanting to take advantage of such a girl? Mo Jingyu was almost about to explode from what he was hearing. There was no way he could possibly bear the thought that his most beautiful and adorable precious daughter had caught the eye of a big-tailed wolf, and that she might be eaten up at any moment. That was preposterous. He would never allow that to happen, even if they owed that person for saving Fei Er's life. But when it involved his own precious daughter, he would never give in. Qing Bei glanced at the completely oblivious, by Ji Yan out of the corner of his eye. With such an amazing subordinate under him, it was probably going to be very, very hard for Lu Junyao to want to be together with Qing Yu. Chapter 259. 1. Turn her into the same type to be together. White Fin's land, evil purgers coalition. Yi Er seems like he has been running to the Feng family manor quite a bit recently. What is it? Was someone in the Feng family so blind that he came to offend you? A man in dark clothes was seated up on the raised pedestal, looking to be in his 30s with outstandingly handsome looks, who exuded a mature charm that would make the ladies mesmerized with him. His deep green eyes were like the finest jade, which seemed to hold unfathomable mystery and danger. This man was the coalition chief of the Evil Purgers Coalition, and his name was Cheong Fei, the most powerful and mysterious might in the White Fin's land, a power that possessed the absolute right to speak in the realm. That face of Cheong Fei looked like he was only in his early 30s, but in actual fact, he was a man from the wolf tribe who was several hundred years old. He was not like any ordinary human, a person who had a much longer lifespan. In those few hundred years, the women he had been with had died of old age one after another, but he had remained looking as young as he had been throughout. Because of his unique bloodline, ordinary humans were not able to birth him a descendant at all, even when they were fortunate enough to get pregnant, due to the fact that they were unable to withstand the innate brutal bloodthirstiness of the wolf tribe's blood. They would be tormented to death. But among the many women he had, there was one miracle. Not only did she birth him an outstanding and healthy heir, he was still unable to forget her after so many years, and it could be said that the woman had truly succeeded. But heaven's will does not always coincide with that of mortals, and when he wanted to hand down his position, people from all quarters were eyeing it covetously. He had carefully shielded and protected his 7-month pregnant wife, but in order to not burden him, she had dragged her heavy body to draw his enemies away from him, only to end up falling into a dimensional tunnel by accident, and not a single trace of them could be found from then on. He had fallen into depression for a very long time because of that, not only for the unborn child, but also for the woman who gave up her own life for his sake. But it all came back full circle, and the child came back to his side in the end. This was probably because of the affinity that they shared. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Cheong Fei treated the child that he had lost and recovered extremely well. As people from the wolf tribe were innately cold and indifferent, he was probably showering all his tenderness and patience onto his one and only heir that carried his blood. Qing Yi Li's thoughts that had drifted far away was gradually pulled back to the present by the man's voice. He then turned his eyes away a little as he replied indifferently, "It's nothing. I was merely dealing with some private matters. If there is anything you need your father to help with, feel free to tell me," Cheong Fei said in a warm and gentle voice. Qing Yi did not say anything else, the expression on his face cold as always. Seeing that, Cheong Fei did not get angry but smiled faintly and said, "Is Yi Er still angry with me? You are an intelligent person, and you would have known all along that you're not an ordinary person. So what could be holding you back?" Chapter 259. 2. Turn her into the same type to be together. If you really become one of us here in the wolf tribe, not only will you take the seat at the pinnacle of authority, you will also come to possess power that no ordinary man possesses, hold the fear and respect of everyone as they submit to you. Isn't that what any man could only dream to gain? But here you are unmoved by any of this in the slightest, choosing to suffer the torment brought about by the backlash from your blood. Cheong Fei seemed to look rather helpless when he spoke till that point. Do you even know how many people are envious of the unique powers the people of the wolf tribe possess? But here you are choosing to reject it. And the moment the man finished saying those words, the aura around Qing Yi Li's body seemed to grow a little colder. He suddenly stood up, his dark green eyes emotionless as they looked expressionlessly at the man. "From the time I grew old enough to remember, I have lived as a human, and I will still remain human from now on. I will never ever become cold and heartless, a wild beast devoid of humanity." Cheong Fei could not help but scoff, his enchanting gaze tinged with indiscernible meaning as he said, "Is ye ere insisting to be a human so stubbornly, because of that lass you came to meet, and have secretly developed feelings for back in the other world?" Qing Yi Li's irises suddenly constricted. "No need to get so worried. I will not lay my hands on a mere lass." The corners of Cheong Fei's mouth lifted slightly, as he stood up to walk over to the man. He reached a hand out to pat Qing Yi Li on his shoulder, and then said, "But ye heir, you have to understand that the two of you are from two completely different worlds, and even if you are willing to suffer all this torment because of her, it will still not be possible for you to be together with a human woman." Qing Yi Li lowered his eyes, and his already pale complexion turned even more frigidly frosty. However, in the very next second, Cheong Fei's voice sounded close to his ear. "But it is not entirely impossible. You will only need to turn her into a werewolf like you, and you can be together with her. It all depends on how much you want to be her in the end." Upon finishing those words, Cheong Fei then lifted a foot and departed from the place, leaving behind Qing Yi Li, who stood there frozen in his spot, unable to recover his senses for a very long while. He can really be with little you? If he turns her to become like him, they can then be together forever? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Cloud Heaven, Bright Moon Temple. Qing Luo Yan had not slept well for several consecutive nights. The moment she closed her eyes at night, she would dream of all the cruel things she had done to her closest kin, all of them with their faces covered in blood, wailing pitifully and asking her why she had done all those things to them. Her temper had become irritable and explosive, where many fell under her venomous hand, tormented to an inch of their last breath by the curse she had laid in their bodies. Song Jian was constantly pressured by her, but as he had lost his heavenly eye, he was unable to see what was wrong inside her body, and was unable to give her any helpful suggestions. All the methods found in the scroll chamber had been of absolutely no use, and he was almost going to suffer a nervous breakdown. Chapter 259. 3. Turn her into the same type to be together. At his wit's end, and with a forlorn face, he unknowingly wandered his way to come to the scroll chamber. The young lady was waving a duster in her hand around like always, leisurely and seemingly highly at ease, a pure and innocent happy smile on her face. Song Jian was suddenly highly envious of her. "Oh, the Grand Priest has come. How is it? Were the books I gave last time of any use to the Grand Priest?" The young lady's voice rose up in a bright and cheerful tone. It was only then that Song Jian's mind was pulled back to the present. As it had been too pressurizing recently, he really could not put on a smile, but just managed a tug at the ends of his lips to say, "Thank you for that. It was nothing. If the Grand Priest has anything that is bothering you, feel free to come look for me. I am really good at these things." Qing Yu said with her eyes turned into two smiling arcs, looking so innocent and guileless, sweet and completely harmless. A girl that one would easily make people put their guard down. Song Jian had probably been tormented by that crazed Qing Lan Fei a little too much recently, and his mind was slightly dazed when he suddenly just could not help himself, but want to tell the young lady with such a bright smile before his eyes everything that was troubling him at that moment. "Little lass, do you know of any way that could help the Temple Lord be freed from her persistent nightmares, and not continue to dream in her sleep?" Qing Yu's eyes flashed with a glint. Of course she knew of a way how. But how long has it merely been? She is already unable to withstand it? A nefarious woman devoid of conscience like her has suffered just a tiny little bit of punishment, and how could this be enough? Grand Priest, there is something that might be worth a try, but... Qing Yu lowered her eyes and bit on her lip, seemingly finding it hard to speak her mind. "You know very well that the Temple Lord doesn't like me, or she would not have sent me to such a far and remote place like this. I fear that she would not agree to let me get close to her." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You really think it will work? Song Jian's eyes widened, like he found it rather hard to believe. He was merely just voicing out his troubles, and it turned out that the young lady really knew of a way to help him. "Actually, I am skilled in a certain kind of hypnosis technique that allows me to be able to change the things that happen in a person's dreams. I will only need to change the things that happen in the Temple Lord's dreams into good and happy ones, and she will not have trouble sleeping anymore. To think that such an amazing skill exists. Song Jian could not help but voice out his praise. Looking greatly relieved, he then went on to say, I will think of a way to convince the Temple Lord, but I will have to ask. Will this hypnosis technique of yours really work? If the Grand Priest does not trust me, you will not have asked me, would you? Qingyu smiled and replied, the fact that I was brought up here from the lower realms to come to this place, does the Grand Priest think that it happened for no good reason? Song Jian was suddenly jolted by the young lady's words. Chapter 259. 4. Turn her into the same type to be together. He had not forgotten how Qing Luoyan had told him that the scarlet gold fiery phoenix's remnant consciousness had disappeared because of this very young lady, and the fact that the scarlet gold fiery phoenix was that person's contracted divine beast. Hence, there must be some secret link in the relationship between these two people. Qing Luoyan would never waste her time on people who were of no use to her, and it was natural that this young lady was not any ordinary person. With that thought in mind, all suspicion left Song Jian. He nodded his head and said, I believe you. I will go report to the Temple Lord right now, and if everything goes well, I will send someone here to summon you over. Upon saying that, Song Jian immediately turned around and left. Qingyu curved up the corners of her lips and watched Song Jian's gradually disappearing back with an indiscernible smile on her face. Qing Luoyan was highly suspicious of everything, and it would not be easy to convince her. But it was not known how Song Jian managed to do it. But it was when night was just about to fall that a black-robed man came to the scroll chamber to bring her to the Temple Lord's sleeping chambers. Everything was happening just as Qingyu predicted. The vast sleeping chambers was cold and cheerless, where just 2 dim lanterns were lit. As the wind blew in through the half-closed doors, the frail and tiny flame in the lanterns wavered, like they would sputter out at any time. You're here. The woman's slightly raspy voice drifted out through the dim darkness, which felt a little strangely captivating. I heard you know hypnosis, which can help stop me being plagued by dreams. Is that really true? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Luoyan slowly got down from her bed and came walking over, dressed in a flimsy thin black gown that struck a stark contrast against her seductive countenance with lips that were red as blood. And because she had not slept well for many days, her garishly pale complexion made her look like a vicious ghost from hell, making her terrifying to look at. Even Song Jian, who was usually by her side, could not help but jump in shock when he saw the woman. Qingyu's face was however calm and composed as she answered in a neither servile nor overbearing tone. In reply to the Temple Lord's question, I can only say that as long as you work together with me, this method will definitely work. Qing Luoyan's gaze looked loftily at her as she said, it would naturally be best if that happens. But if this Temple Lord here does not see any improvement, I'm sure you realize that your life will then be in danger. There is nothing for the Temple Lord to be worried about. If I am not confident, I will not offer to do it at all. Qingyu replied with a faint smile. Now, will the Temple Lord please lie down on the bed, and let your body fall into its most relaxed state, and then close your eyes. Chapter 260. 1. Am I the man you love the most? Accompanying the young lady's soothing voice was an almost magical power that made Qing Luoyan slowly close her eyes and fall into a dream state. Her memory seemed to have returned to 500 years ago. At that time, everything had not changed yet. The divine temple had expanded all over cloud heaven, its reach extending like the light of midday as the most powerful might. Everyone yearned to be able to join the divine temple, because it was known to be the place where celestial air was the most robust and intense, a sacred realm of immortals blessed by the gods, where a normal person's 100-year cultivation outside could not compare to 10 years' worth of cultivation here in the divine temple. It could be seen from here just how highly envied people in the divine temple were by others, and the suitors of the princesses in the divine temple came to their door like it was a marketplace. Some sincere, and some with other intentions. Having seen too many glib-tongued men who whispered hypocritical sweet nothings, Qing Luo Yan grew more haughty and arrogant, showing contempt for each and every man. But it was this one time that she saw someone that caught her eye, a man she would not forget for the rest of her life. It was the day where several major powers came to pay a visit to the Divine Temple, which coincided with the day the Divine Temple was holding a ceremony to make their offerings to the gods that happened once every 100 years. That man had come to visit together with his father, and the first time that he saw him, she wasn't all that charmed. But as that person was really outstanding looking, especially the long backswept phoenix-like eyes he possessed, she found them highly captivating. His looks were more exquisite than those of a woman's, and you could even call him beautiful. Very few men could have such outstanding looks which were so stunning. She remembered how all her sisters had said in jest that it was such a pity the man had not been born a woman, and that if all men were so beautiful looking, then how were women going to continue to live? That's right. That man left such an exceptionally deep impression when one met him for the first time. And it was that face of his that made Qing Luo Yan, who always looked down at people, to can't help but cast her eyes his way. That could be the hands of fate at work. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She was a noble princess of the noble Divine Temple, and the two of them should not have any interaction between them. She had never taken a step out from the Divine Temple, and had never come into close contact with any men outside of the place. She had probably become tired of those two-faced suitors, who harbored hidden intentions which caused her heart to remain calm, without feeling a ripple of emotion. She was born with an eccentric personality, and besides her eldest and youngest sister, who was a little closer to her, she was distant towards all her other siblings. On most days, the only thing she had for company was a beautiful and adorable-looking wild dark snow hare that her father had given to her during her 100-year-old come-of-age ceremony. Its body was black as ink, except for a white tuft of fur on its forehead. Its eyes that were beautiful as rubies were highly intelligent, looking as if they could speak. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.